Okay, good morning, everybody. We're about ready to get started here. I'd like to introduce Dermis Caesar. He is the Application Support Manager for the City of Durham and Durham County MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. He's also an adjunct professor of cybersecurity at National University, GIS at American Sentinel University, and management systems at DeVry University, and will soon be starting yet another gig as an adjunct professor at Western Governors University. And he's going to talk to us today about the intersection of Esri and Google and Bing and open source and all of the above and how they work together for enterprise transportation planning systems.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to talk about these systems like, GIS systems essentially. Google, Esri, Bing Maps, and open source platforms and cloud platforms all together collectively. And then I'm going to talk about some of the applications that we have done as an entity and then what we have observed out of these applications. That's what I'm going to be talking about. And first of all, I'll be looking into what's called essentially how do they, evaluate or compare to each other on the web platform, essentially. That's my focus area, first thing to say. And then I'm going to be looking at every single option as I listed over here, pretty much out there, including the hosted mapping platforms, and then open development platforms, the development technologies, essentially, put it that way. And then I'm going to talk about some of the applications that we have developed, essentially, using these platforms. And then what are the things that I do recommend based on, again, our observations, our what's called experience with these platforms. What are the factors you need to consider, essentially, when choosing a platform of your choice for your companies, for your work, for your project, things like that. And then I would conclude with some of the, critical observations, as to what's called as how do they compare, like what are the pluses, minuses, from the end user's perspective, how does it feel? And as we know, like WebGIS is like providing the GIS capabilities, visualization, analytical analysis capabilities essentially over the web using various technologies available out there. And because of what's called essentially delivering the what's called quite a bit of huge, humongous big data contents over the web, we are talking about the latency. We are talking about what's called essentially pulling the information from the various sites, servers, depending on the case, they may or may not be available. And then performance would be affected by the number of users who is accessing the same service or services essentially across the web. And then definitely limited display technologies would be affecting the what's called client application. As we all know, throughout what's called essentially cities, counties, like our public or citizens essentially may be using anything possible. Like in these days with the Google Fiber and other guys, essentially, we are going to be pretty much getting higher speed connections, but still there are people out there who may be using, who knows. And then security is another major issue, even though we hardly notice or we hardly touch, or especially, these big companies, Esri or Google or others hardly mentions about it. It's a critical issue. You need to realize, especially for the mission critical applications, especially for the applications that you shouldn't be exposing out there, like emergency applications, things like that. Essentially, the security as well, security of the services, making sure that they are really secured is a critical element as well. And options for WebGIS, as we know, like, private companies, Esri, Google, Bing Maps, all these, that's an option. Open source. Open source doesn't mean, by the way, as we all know, more than likely, doesn't mean that it's a freebie. It may come with the what's called gotchas, essentially. Okay, you could use it, but when you start developing it or when you commercialize it, you need to pay for it. It's not free. Or support is not free, things like that. Hosted applications, there are tons of what's called cloud hosted applications that enables you to develop your own application with a speedier possible way. And then there are, associated technologies and APIs exist, as we know, like every company has its own API, put it that way. Even though at the core or at the base level, they may be developed using what's called JavaScript or maybe using the .NET components or others, but there is quite a bit of differences essentially as to development, as to the ease of the development with these APIs being chosen by the companies of the GIS. And Esri is one of the well-established since 1960s. It's around, as we all know, like they have what's called lion's share of the market, as we all know. And then RTS server product kind of first, like they started with the RKMS, as some of you may know, and then they later on transitioned over to the RTS server in 2004. And then they were offering initial like Silverlight and like Flash, all these options essentially for development activities. But later on, they kind of stick with what's called JavaScript API right now. Pretty much the major development tool available or development environment available to us with associated toolkits like Dojo, EXT.js, jQuery, things like that. Essentially, I'm talking about. And they offer what's called their own cloud platforms, like cloud-enabled platform, which is RTS Online. And their kind of, accounts easy to set up, like especially freebie accounts, kind of they provide you rather easily. You could kind of test it out. You could kind of try it out yourself and see what do they offer. And some of the functionalities, as we all know, geocoding, displaying search results, displaying what's called routes, display analysis, editing, 3D mapping, and many other functionalities they do provide online through their platform. Especially using the JavaScript API, you could customize what's called RTS server services and then, use them, plug them into the what's called some kind of seamless application of your own. And this is a geocoding sample. I don't want to kind of go over. This is kind of starts with what's called, some kind of a declaration of the what's called major variables, and then after that, creation of the map, and then, pulling your data in, and then, putting the what's called widgets or the what's called tools or functions in. Put it that way. That's how it is working in general. Google Maps API, they started in 2005. By the way, in my opinion, Google Maps API started in 2005 with the what's called their Google Maps platform delivery, kind of impacted the WebJS a lot. Even as they copied over what's called essentially, transitioned some of the technologies or, kind of just bring it in. Otherwise they were kind of their RKMS platform was so clumsy you wouldn't even believe, as we all know. And then when they first started, the Google Maps API started, definitely they make the public aware of, there could be a good WebJS option available online. Anybody could use it. That was the kind of one of the premises of the Google Maps API as far as I'm concerned. Initially, when they first started, we installed what's called Google Maps, Google Earth, especially on our company's computers, every single one of them. But next day, we had to pull it out because of what's called bandwidth that they were kind of consuming. But overall, definitely, Google Maps made the JS web mapping friendlier, easier, speedier for everybody. And then right now, everybody is pretty much familiar with the JS through the Google Maps. That's a kind of a recognition more of. And they use, again, JavaScript API in general. And then they could kind of, this Google Maps API offers as well, like several what's called geocoding, reverse geocoding, directions, all this stuff essentially as a functionalities. And then there are quite a bit of terms of service. I mean, initially it starts as free, but if you start to commercialize, if you try to make money, then you need to pay for it. It's not free. And then largely used by the public, as we all know, like Google Maps, Google search platform, pretty much everybody knows in the world. And this is some of the functionalities they do offer, as we all know, like routes, displaying search results, route visualization, geocoding, reverse geocoding. Some of the what's called technology is being developed, like especially for the transit, I could tell you, or for the traffic data, especially as it pertains to our work, is their own, like proprietary. You can't use it. There is a licensing terms, essentially. You can't use as a background for incorporating with the other services, other what's called essential technologies, put it that way. And Street View, similar, and custom street panoramas and things like that they have been offering. And this is kind of one of the sample codes, again, geocoding sample for their application. Similar kind of a, approach, similar what's called essentially a context or applicable, put it that way, in general, as far as I am concerned. And the third option is Bing Maps. They kind of deliver high-performance maps, essentially, again, over the web, developer-friendly. I mean, again, they are using the more of a JavaScript API or what's called .NET components, .NET-based development environments. And they are feature-rich. They do provide quite a bit of features or functionalities, essentially. And then you could kind of use various 3D maps, 3-side and offline maps, all this stuff essentially through their platform. And it's not free again, you know, as we all know, it could be like quite hefty as to what's called essential licensing costs, depending on the case. And then these are some of the things they do offer, like geocoding, elevations, routing, traffic incidents, boundary data, multiple culture support, and things like that, and imagery. And there is quite a bit of like core features, new features like KML and shapefile supports, things like that do exist for this, what's called essentially, for this platform. And this is an example, again, geocoding example for the, what's called the V8 web control platform of the Bing Maps, how you develop essentially some kind of geocoding functionality using the Bing Maps version 8. And other than that, there are quite a bit of hosted platforms, jscloud.com, for example, or cartodb.com platforms, essentially. And then ArcGIS Online as well is another host platform, as we all know, hosted by the ESRI. They do provide, like, you know, easily, like configurable, easily what's called essentially publishable applications in a nutshell. I mean, development time definitely quite a bit of could be reduced because of what's called essentially you don't need to deal with the background stuff. You know, they already provided it's already for you ready there, ready to be used. But when you start what's called essentially experiment with what's called some customization options or like automation options as it pertains to your workflow, as it pertains to your business, you have to deal with what's called essentially switching over some kind of your own on-premise platforms. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to do it. There are quite a bit of restrictions do exist, as we all know. And there is quite a bit of free mapping platforms as well exist. Again, open source and free mapping, I'd like to separate. I mean, they are not the same, by the way. Open source may come with what's called essentially quite a bit of strings attached. But open and free, like FOSS, F-O-S-S, if I'm not mistaken, free open source server or services, things like that, is what's called essentially means free and open source development. And then there is like OpenStreetMap, as we all know, more than likely. And then free as your online account. Again, it's not, you know, it's what's called essentially more of a entice you into what's called the as a platform offering, put it that way. And quite a bit of what's called essentially free services being provided by the companies to pull you into their platform and tie you with what's called essentially as a customer, put it that way. And open development platforms, as we know, like these are some of the platforms available, Python, R, and then Visual Analytics, things like that essentially available, especially in these times. You know, like people like generally using the JavaScript API, JavaScript toolkits, and then derivatives, AngularJS, React.js, whatever, all this, you know, out there, put it that way. JavaScript essentially is the major platform, as we already indicated. There are quite a bit of what's called essentially extensions or toolkits available out there, D3, 3JS, P5JS, things like that, jQuery, you know, Dojo, all this stuff essentially part of JavaScript-based extensions, put it that way. And then it definitely provides on the client side interactivity to the web development, put it that way. And these are some of the example applications I'd like to kind of just a little bit show you. Like we developed, of course, applications right and left, you know. Like, for example, ASI-based application. And then you are going to see the what's called presentation in the upcoming sessions about it. Like we are trying to upgrade it, update it to the what's called newer, much more better platform. This is ASI-based, put it that way. Like this mapping element, put it that way. And that's one of the platform, and then you could get some kind of basic information about what's called TIP projects, you know, what they are about. And then you are going to be hearing again in the follow-up sessions, in one of the sessions. Sorry. Sorry, yeah. So I need to...
for a second, and then it looked like it slid over to your back.
Okay, if I minimize it, will it show? No. Here you go. Where did it go? Okay, it looks like in any case, in your spare time, you may look at it. Sorry about it. That'll be better. Looks like we have some kind of technical glitch deal. I'm not sure where did it go. And then there are some, like we developed using the Esri platform, as I expressed already, like TIP application, for example. And then we are developing a traffic data portal, put it that way, using the RTS Online platform mainly. And there are some, like we have been using Google, for example, especially because of the capabilities of the real-time traffic data, like provision of the real-time traffic data and other like transit data, what's called possibilities or probabilities. And there are, like another application platform, kind of an open source, I would say, Translog, for example, we are kind of using in order to disseminate the transit information online, real-time transit information online. And then we have been using the CartoDB as a hosted JS platform, essentially, in order to provide the. And this is the what's called, for example, our traffic data information based on the Google, as you could see over here. And then on the other tab, you're going to see the TIP application. And if you click on the others, this is the TIP application with the mapping component incorporated. I could kind of, I think at this time, I may play with it. How do you see it?
Display settings. There.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Where should we? Okay.
Yeah.
Which one you want?
This is what's called essentially Esri-based application that we developed using the what's called essentially Esri's ArcGIS Online and associated development technologies. And this is the what's called essentially Google-based traffic data layer for our region, essentially. Like we are just getting the snapshot of the traffic information for our region, Durham, Chapel Hill, Scarborough Metropolitan Planning Region. And then
What, this one?
Translog, I'd like to kind of show you. Let us click on it. One more time.
What have you done with your legs?
Okay. Yeah, control, yeah. Maybe if you use control, click.
There we go.
Yeah. It opened more than likely. This is the Translog. Of course, you couldn't see it.
Yeah, here we go.
Right now. This is Translog application, essentially like, transit agencies, schedules, like real-time picture of what's called essentially where the buses are and then how they are moving. You are going to see these what's called essentially place marks would be moving around. You could observe right here, for example. You see? Like real-time what's called essential transit information. And then CartoDB, if you could open it up, this is another what's called development we have been doing. Triangle region. This is what's called essential transportation performance management system using the CartoDB product essentially. And then showing the what's called essentially speed, safety, VC ratio, like velocity over capacity, volume over capacity ratios, things like that applicable to the transportation performance based on the CartoDB product. And then let us continue.
Okay, I'll let you.
Yeah. And then factors to consider, as to the what's called, based on, again, our experience, my experience, especially I have been in the field like for about 2 decades right now. First thing you need to consider, like when you are picking up the what's called development platform, should be the needs and requirements, what you need for the project, for the service you are going to be providing, for your company, for your organization, or whatsoever, doesn't matter. What you need exactly, or what your customers or clients or what's called stakeholders or what's called your sponsor needs. Put it that way, depending on the case, what we are talking about, or internal or external customers need. And what are the requirements? You need to clarify these, essentially, like as to what's called, what the current possibilities, current needs are, and what would be the possible needs in the future. Nothing is static, as we all know. Unless you see what's called essentially this feature deal, you're going to be stuck with something that you don't like in the end. And then availability of the data and tools and functionality, readily availability especially. Anything is possible. But if you invest time, if you invest resources, that's what it translates to. How much is readily available? Especially, you better look at it. Time and budget. How much budget, how much time do we have in order to develop this application, in order to develop this unique utility type of a deal? And then ease of use, ease of development. Essentially, you are going to be looking at person's familiarity and experience with the systems, especially Esri. Everybody knows it, so you may want to stick with what's called Esri platform. Stakeholders and audience of the Web.js application, especially. It's not just for your company, it's maybe for the public and partners, how familiar they are as well, you need to consider. And then integration with the other systems if and when needed. And in most of the cases, none of the systems are actually perfect, as we all know. They all have issues. When you try to integrate it, you need to watch out the interoperability, interaction, or what's called handshaking issues with the across the applications, and then licensing issues across the applications as well. And in a nutshell, as a conclusion, I would say each and every mapping platform has its own advantages and disadvantages, issues, put it that way. And then some information, especially with some of the applications, is better than what's called other technology platforms, like Google Traffic, for example, is the best from my perspective. Imagery, Bing Imagery is the best for what's called essential imagery provision. Data coverage accuracy differs among what's called essentially technology providers, like Esri's base maps. I'm not sure how useful it is, to be honest with you. And Google Maps, Bing Maps, some of them perform much more better on the web, especially Google Maps, definitely we should recognize as a speed, for the speed. Bing Maps, similarly right now. And then some of the what's called development APIs are much more easier, depending on your familiarity, especially JavaScript is what's called core of pretty much any and every single development platform for every single technology that we are talking about in these days. And some platforms provide fine-grained, better in-depth tools, like Esri is one of them, definitely. They have quite a bit of depth of what's called analytical functionalities under their belt or under their technologies. And interoperation, unfortunately, is not there. I mean, let us put it that way. If you try to kind of mix and match, or what's called essentially bring the multiple platforms to get what's called, to bring in best of each platform onto your application, it's not going to be there for the most part, because everybody is trying to monopolize, as far as I could tell you, Google or Bing or Azure, doesn't matter. Everybody is monopolizing. So that's what I would say with that. Thank you. And then any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you implemented any of the free open source within DHC right now?
We haven't done it, but we tested Leaflet a little bit, more of, yeah, we haven't done it much. Any other questions? Thank you.